I have been asked to share something with you on acceptance. What does it mean when we say that we have accepted something in our lives? Do we mean that we have no control and have resigned ourselves to accept what is? Does it mean acquiescence? Are we resigning ourselves to accepting the cards that life has dealt us? These are a few of the questions I have asked and answered for myself as a young boy of the Jim Crow South era. I observed and did what were the acceptable things for blacks to do in this society. I drank from the black water fountain and not from the white fountain because it was the acceptable thing to do. When I went to the back of the bus because it was unacceptable for me to sit in the front seat. I even went around to the back door of Mr. Fontenot's grocery store to buy milk and bread for my mother and grandmother because going through the front door was not the acceptable thing to do. I even stayed on my side of the beach because it was not acceptable for me to venture over to the other side of that long, seemingly endless net, that seemingly endless beach net, separating the white kids from the black. I felt that I had to accept these social restrictions that I could not change. But it was not the kind of acceptance that Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama are talking about. As an angry young teenager of the Black Power era of the mid-1960s, my serenity prayer was not to accept the things I cannot change, but to change the things I cannot accept. Rather than accepting the cards that this society had dealt me, I would deal from a deck from my own choosing. I elected to become a black revolutionary, simply being resigned to their fate and put their hope in the sweet by and by as enslaved human beings. Was I required to accept the discrimination and injustices that I was confronted with as a child in the Jim Crow South? Should my great-grandparents have simply just, given up, resigned the fate that they were in? And should I have not been angry and stand up and declare that I am black, I am proud, and that I am somebody? The answer is complex. It's hard to talk truthfully about the idea of acceptance, depending on who is talking. It can either tip over into denial or into fearful submission or into a shallow idea of living in the moment. The kind of acceptance I want to embrace is the acceptance that can stand with strength and dignity in the face of injustice and oppression and evil. It is not a soft acceptance or a resignation or a submission. It is intimately related to that powerful revolutionary force, forgiveness. Without forgiveness, there is no possibility of real acceptance. In 1969, I was implicated in a shootout on the UCLA campus in which I was wounded and 2 people were shot and killed. One of the men killed had a wife and a 3-week-old daughter. Although I had no weapon and had not fired a shot, I was tried and convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to life in prison for a crime I did not commit. I was not responsible for the death of her husband and the loss of her child's father. Years later, through God's grace, I would come to understand that although I had not pulled the trigger, I was in fact entrenched in a mindset that was willing to use violence to attain its end. And if all of us on campus that day had not been entrenched in that same mindset, the deaths of 2 promising young men would not have occurred. Many years later, I would ask the wife of one of those men who were killed for her forgiveness. Forgiveness not for anything that I had done, but for my part in the adversarial atmosphere that caused the death of 2 human beings. Receiving her forgiveness was an instrumental part of my own healing and acceptance. Of course, I had my own forgiving to do as well. This outrageously racist country had spent centuries honing its oppressive tactics, which I saw bearing down on me, my loved ones, and my whole community. As a passionate young man who wanted to be part of the change, I responded in the most energetic, intense way I could, at the risk of my own life and well-being. For my troubles, I ended up in prison with a life sentence. In prison, I did not elude further racist attacks. I soon learned that white prison guards were setting up black prisoners to be killed, and attempts were made on my own life. I realized that if I stayed in prison, I would not stay alive. I escaped from San Quentin in 1974 and spent 20 years as a fugitive in South America. The endless disruption and continual heartache brought on by American racism has followed me through all these years. Through the denial of my children's right to come to the U.S., and through a sickening abuse of justice which led me to serving 26 years in prison and labeled a domestic terrorist for my attempts to resist. Only released in the end because my senior citizen status. I have had a lot of forgiving to do, and I can't say that is done. Forgiveness, as I understand it, does not say it's okay that you did that. It says what you did was wrong, and I will continue to affirm your humanity even in the face of that. To the degree that I live in forgiveness, I live in that place of acceptance. Thank you.